A hungry baby, an empty fridge, a desperate text asking for $30, sent to the wrong number. Kesha Brown's fingers trembled as she typed the message she never thought she'd send. Her 8-month-old son, Malik, lay in her arms, too exhausted from hunger to cry anymore. The apartment was cold. The radiator had been broken for weeks. The last jar of baby food sat empty on the counter. Her wallet held $7.42. She needed help. She needed it now. With shaking hands, she typed to the only person she thought she could ask, her cousin Rashida. "Hey, I'm so sorry to ask. Can I borrow $30 for baby food? I'll pay you back Friday, please." She hit send. What Kesha didn't know was that Rashida had changed her number 3 weeks ago. The text landed on the phone of Samuel Park, a Korean Mafia boss who controlled ports, construction unions, and half of Chicago's underground economy. A man feared by politicians, respected by criminals, and utterly alone in a penthouse worth more than Kesha would earn in 10 lifetimes. Sam stared at the message. He should have deleted it. He should have ignored it. But something about those words, "I'm so sorry to ask," stopped him cold. Men didn't beg him. Women didn't text him about baby food. And no one ever asked him for only $30. By noon the next day, he was standing at Kesha's door, not with money, with groceries. What began as a wrong-numbered text would spiral into something neither of them could have imagined, a collision of two worlds, poverty and power, fear and mercy. As Sam discovered corruption tied to his own businesses, money stolen from workers like Kesha, he realized that one desperate mother held the key to dismantling an empire built on stolen wages. A single text message wouldn't just feed a baby, it would tear down a criminal organization from the inside and give two broken people a second chance at purpose, redemption, and something that looked a lot like family. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with sirens or sermons. Sometimes they arrive at noon, carrying groceries, standing quietly at your door, because a stranger chose to care. The jar was empty. Kesha Brown turned it upside down over her son's mouth, waiting for one more drop of sweet potato puree to fall. Nothing came. She set it down on the chipped formica counter of her South Side studio, where the radiator had been rattling for 2 weeks, blowing cold air instead of heat. In her arms, 8-month-old Malik made that sound, the weak, exhausted whimper of a baby too hungry to cry anymore. "I know, baby," her voice cracked. "Mama's gonna fix this." Outside, fireworks cracked the winter sky, leftover celebrations from some Gold Coast rooftop party, the sound echoing across the frozen Chicago streets. While the city slept off champagne and caviar, Kesha was counting change she'd already counted 3 times. She opened her purse. $7.42. Baby food cost $12 for a 6-pack. The kind Malik could actually digest without throwing up cost $18. She'd done the math 100 times. The math never changed. Her phone buzzed. Not a call, a notification she didn't need to open. Final notice, rent overdue, 19 days. Kesha walked to the window, bouncing Malik gently against her chest. From here, if she stood on her toes, she could see the distant glow of downtown Chicago, that glittering world where women wore pearls to walk their dogs, where penthouse parties lasted until sunrise, where people worried about which private school to choose, not whether their child would eat. 2 months ago, she was close enough to taste that world, not living in it, never that, but cleaning it. A steady position with prestige property services, 5 buildings, good tips, a supervisor who remembered her name. Then she'd noticed something. Small things. Missing tips that should have been left, hours logged on her timesheet that never appeared on her paycheck, money disappearing from cleaning staff across multiple buildings, pennies to them, survival to her. She'd asked about it, Just a question. Just trying to understand. 1 week later, her supervisor handed her a final check. Position restructured. Corporate decision. Nothing personal. They took her key card before she could clean out her locker. Security watched her leave like she'd stolen something. That was October. This was late December. Now she pieced together shifts, a few hours here, a few there, cleaning offices at 4 a.m. for cash under the table, watching other people's children in the afternoons, working for people who paid late or didn't pay at all. The math never added up. Every week she fell further behind. And now the baby food was gone. There was one person left to ask, one lifeline Keisha had been saving for a real emergency. Her cousin, Rashida. They'd grown up together on the South Side, shared clothes, shared secrets. When Malik was born and the father vanished, Rashida was the one who showed up with diapers and didn't ask questions. She worked 2 jobs herself, barely scraping by, but she'd pressed a crumpled 20 into Keisha's hand at the hospital. Family don't let family starve, you hear me? You call me any time. Keisha had never called. Pride was sometimes the only thing that kept you standing. But Malik was hungry. She pulled out her phone and found Rashida's number, the one she'd texted 1,000 times before. Her finger trembled as she typed. "Hey, I'm so sorry to ask, but I don't have anyone else. Malik's out of food and I only have $7. Can I borrow $30 to get through till Friday's paycheck? I promise I'll pay you back. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." She hit send before shame could stop her. 11:47 p.m. What Keisha didn't know, couldn't possibly know, was that Rashida had changed her number 3 weeks ago after an ex wouldn't stop calling. The old number had been reassigned by the phone company. It now belonged to someone else. 52 floors above Lake Michigan, in a penthouse worth more than most people would earn in a lifetime, Samuel Park stood alone at his floor-to-ceiling windows, watching fireworks bloom and die over the water. The space around him was a fortress of success. Marble imported from Italy, art that museums had tried to buy, furniture designed by names most people had never heard of, a kitchen that had never cooked a meal. Silence. Always silence. His phone buzzed on the granite countertop. Sam glanced at it, expecting the usual. Business associates kissing up, politicians returning calls, someone wanting something. He almost didn't look. Almost. But something made him pick it up. An unknown number. A message that started with an apology. "I'm so sorry to ask." Sam read it twice, then a third time. Men didn't beg him, women didn't text him about baby food, and no one ever asked him for only $30. His thumb hovered over the delete button, but something stopped him. That double apology. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." The desperation wrapped in dignity. He knew that sound. He'd heard it in his mother's voice 30 years ago, standing in a factory parking lot, apologizing to her supervisor for her missing wages. She was fired the next day. Sam set down his champagne glass. He opened his contacts and scrolled to a name he rarely called directly, Min Jun, his head of security and information. The phone rang once. "Yes, sir?" Sam's voice was calm, measured, the voice of a man who controlled half of Chicago's underground economy without ever raising his voice. "Trace a number. I want everything. Name, address, employment history, financial records. I want to know who sent me a text at 11:47 tonight." Silence on the other end. Then, "How deep do you want me to go?" Sam stared out at the city he owned, at the lights glittering below him like fallen stars. All the way. Kesha's alarm screamed at 4:30 a.m. She'd slept maybe 2 hours, the kind of half-sleep where you're never sure if you were actually unconscious or just pretending. Malik had finally stopped crying around 3, exhausted from hunger, his little body too tired to protest anymore. The text she'd sent sat in her phone like a ticking bomb. No response. Of course, no response. Rashida was probably sleeping like normal people did, people who didn't have to choose between feeding their babies and paying rent. She dressed in the dark, black pants, white shirt, the uniform of invisible women who cleaned up after visible people. Mrs. Brennan's condo today. 14th floor of the Walton Tower. 6 bedrooms for 2 people, a kitchen bigger than Kesha's entire apartment, bathrooms with heated floors. Kesha kissed Malik's forehead. He didn't wake up. Miss Patterson from 2B would watch him for $15 and whatever food Kesha could spare. It wasn't ideal, but Miss Patterson was 73 and kind, and she sang to Malik when he cried. The bus ride downtown took an hour. Kesha sat in the back, her head against the cold window, watching the city transform from boarded-up liquor stores to coffee shops that charged $8 for a latte. Every stop brought her closer to that other world, the one she served but would never belong to. She arrived at 7 a.m. sharp. The building manager, Derek, was already there, clipboard in hand, suspicion in his eyes. Kesha, on time for once. She'd been late exactly twice in 4 months, both times because the bus broke down, but Derek wasn't interested in excuses from people like her. "Yes, sir?" she said quietly. Inside Mrs. Brennan's condo, Kesha moved like a ghost. Dust the mantels, vacuum the Persian rugs, scrub the bathrooms until the marble gleamed, make the beds with hospital corners, wipe down surfaces that were already clean. The Brennans had family photos everywhere. 3 children, all grown, all doctors or lawyers, vacation pictures from places Kesha couldn't pronounce, a wedding photo from 1987, both of them young and beautiful and confident that the world would always be kind to them. What would that feel like, Kesha wondered, to know your children would be safe, to never worry about $30? 52 floors away, Sam Park was reading a file that made his blood run cold. Kesha Marie Brown, age 26, single mother, high school graduate, former employee of Prestige Property Services, terminated October 15th. Prestige Property Services, one of his shell companies, one of the legitimate fronts that washed money from his shipping operations, his construction unions, his various interests that existed in the gray spaces between legal and not. Sam scrolled through the file, employment history, payroll records, the termination notice. Reason for termination? Position eliminated due to restructuring. That was corporate speak for she asked too many questions. He kept reading. 3 formal complaints filed in September about missing wages, tips that disappeared, hours that somehow never made it to her paycheck. She documented everything, dates, amounts, names, and then she'd been fired. Sam stood and walked to his window. The city looked different in daylight. Still beautiful, still powerful, but now he could see the cracks, the places where people like Kesha Brown lived and struggled and disappeared. His empire was built on control. Information was currency, fear was leverage, and loyalty was purchased or enforced. He'd spent 20 years building a network that stretched from the ports to City Hall, from construction sites to boardrooms. But someone in his organization was stealing from cleaning ladies. Sam's mother had been a cleaning lady. She worked 3 jobs to keep him fed, to keep him in school, to keep him away from the gangs that would have swallowed him whole. She died at 52, her body worn out from decades of scrubbing other people's toilets. She never asked for help. Too proud, too afraid. Just like Kesha Brown, apologizing twice in one text message for needing $30. Sam picked up his phone and called Minjin again. I need an address, and I need it now. The black SUV pulled up outside Keisha's building at exactly 12 p.m. The neighborhood noticed. This wasn't the kind of place where luxury vehicles appeared without reason. Curtains twitched. Mrs. Washington from across the hall peered through her door chain. 2 kids playing basketball stopped mid-shot to stare. Keisha was feeding Malik, or trying to. She'd found half a jar of applesauce in Miss Patterson's refrigerator. Expired, but probably safe. Malik ate it desperately, his little hands grabbing at the spoon. The knock on her door made her jump. 3 sharp raps. Official. Demanding. Her first thought was the landlord. Her second was child services. Someone had reported her, seen Malik crying, decided she wasn't fit. Her third thought, the one that made her hand shake, was that she'd done something wrong with that text, that somehow asking for help had crossed a line she didn't know existed. She opened the door with Malik on her hip. The man standing there wasn't what she expected. He was Korean, maybe mid-40s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her car had when it still ran, perfectly tailored, perfectly pressed. His expression was unreadable, not angry, not kind, just present. In his hands were grocery bags, 3 of them, heavy ones. They stared at each other for what felt like an hour, but was probably 3 seconds. Keisha Brown? His voice was quiet, controlled, with the faintest trace of an accent. She nodded, unable to speak. I think you texted the wrong number, but you needed help. He held out the bags. Keisha didn't move, couldn't move. This didn't make sense. Strangers didn't show up with groceries. Strangers especially didn't show up in $1,000 suits carrying baby food for women they'd never met. I don't understand, she managed. May I come in? Not a demand, a request. Polite, almost gentle. Every instinct screamed no, but Malik was whimpering again, and she could see baby formula in one of the bags, and she was so tired of being afraid, so tired of being alone. She stepped aside. Sam Park entered her apartment like he was walking into a boardroom, careful, observant, taking in every detail. The peeling taint, the broken radiator, the empty jars on the counter, the crib in the corner that was really just a donated playpen with a thin mattress. He set the bags on the counter and began unpacking. Baby food, jars and pouches, the expensive organic kind. Formula, 3 cans. Diapers, rice, pasta, canned vegetables, bread, peanut butter, milk. Real food. More than $30 worth. More like $300. Keisha's voice cracked. I can't pay you back, not right away. I'm not asking you to. Sam turned to look at her, and for the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not pity, something else. Recognition, maybe. Like he was seeing someone he used to know. Feed your son, he said quietly. Keisha's hand shook as she opened a jar of baby food. Malik grabbed for it immediately, eating like he'd been starving, which he had been. Sam watched silently, his jaw tight. When Malik finally slowed, his little belly full for the first time in days, Keisha started crying. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears that she couldn't stop. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. I don't know who you are, but... Samuel Park, and you worked for me once. Keisha froze. Prestige Property Services? He nodded. You fired me, Keisha said, anger breaking through the gratitude. I didn't fire you, but someone in my organization did, and I'm going to find out why. Sam didn't leave right away. He sat at Keisha's wobbly kitchen table, the one she'd found on a curb 3 years ago, and asked questions. Not interrogation questions, not the kind that made you feel small, just careful, specific questions about her time at Prestige Property Services, the buildings she'd cleaned, the managers she'd reported to, the complaints she'd filed. Keisha told him everything. What did she have to lose? She was already at the bottom. She told him about the missing tips, cash left by tenants that never made it to the cleaning staff, about the payroll discrepancies, hours worked but never paid, about how she'd kept her own records, writing everything down in a spiral notebook because she knew something was wrong. She told him about the meeting with her supervisor, Derek, where she'd shown him her notebook, how his face had changed from annoyed to something else, something that looked like fear. You still have that notebook? Sam asked. Keisha nodded. She retrieved it from a drawer, cheap, spiral-bound, pages filled with her careful handwriting, dates, amounts, names. 4 months of documentation. He flipped through it, his expression never changing, but his knuckles went white, gripping the pages. "Can I borrow this?" "Why?" "Because someone is stealing from people who can't afford to lose $1, and they're doing it in my name." He stood to leave, then paused at the door. "I'm going to send someone to fix your radiator, and you're not going back to work at Prestige. Not yet. I'll cover your rent for this month while I figure out what happened." "I don't want charity," Keisha said, pride flaring despite everything. "This isn't charity," Sam said. "This is an investment. You documented evidence of fraud in my company. That makes you valuable. Stay home, stay safe, and don't talk to anyone about this." 3 days later, Keisha's radiator was fixed by a crew that arrived at 8 a.m. and left by noon. They didn't ask for payment. They didn't ask questions. That same afternoon, Derek called. "Keisha, hey, listen, there's been some confusion about your termination. We'd like to bring you back. Better hours, better pay." She knew a setup when she heard one. "I'm not interested," she said carefully. Silence on the other end. Then, "You talked to someone, didn't you? Keisha, listen to me. Whatever they told you, whatever they promised you, it's not worth it. You've got a baby to think about. Be smart." The threat was clear, even wrapped in concern. "Goodbye, Derek," she said, and hung up. Her hands were shaking. She called the number Sam had left, a direct line, he'd said. "Use it if anything happens." He answered on the first ring. "Derek called me," she said. "He threatened me." "I know. I've been listening." That should have scared her, the idea that Samuel Park had her phone tapped, that he was monitoring her calls. But instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Protected. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now, I go hunting, and you stay exactly where you are. Lock your door, don't answer it for anyone but me." That night, Keisha bolted every lock on her door and pushed her dresser against it for good measure. She held Malik close, listening to his steady breathing, wondering what kind of monster she'd accidentally awakened, and what kind of man would show up with groceries before declaring war. Sam Park's empire was built on 3 foundations: information, loyalty, and the calculated use of fear. For 20 years, he'd maintained control through a network of people who understood that betrayal meant consequences too severe to consider. But empires rot from within. The audit Sam ordered was surgical and secret. He brought in an outside forensic accountant, someone with no connection to his organization, someone who owed him nothing and couldn't be bought. He gave her Keisha's notebook and full access to Prestige Property Services books. What she found made his blood boil. The scheme was elegant in its simplicity. Small amounts skimmed from low-wage workers across 12 buildings. Tips redirected. Hours shaved. Overtime denied. Each individual loss was minor, $5 here, $20 there, but multiplied across 100 workers over 18 months, it added up to just over $2 million. $2 million stolen from people who made minimum wage. The money flowed through a shell company called Midwest Staffing Solutions, which existed only on paper. From there, it was laundered through a series of consulting fees and equipment rentals, eventually landing in offshore accounts. The forensic accountant traced the accounts to a single person, James Choi. Sam stared at the name on the report for a full minute, his coffee going cold on his desk. James Choi. Uncle James. His mother's closest friend, the man who'd given Sam his first job in construction, who'd taught him how to navigate the gray spaces between legal and not. The man Sam had trusted to run his legitimate businesses while he focused on the less legitimate ones. Family wasn't always blood. Sometimes it was the people who stood beside you when blood family ran. James had been there when Sam's mother died. He'd been at her funeral. He'd helped Sam consolidate power in those early, brutal years. And now this. Sam picked up his phone and called Min Jun. "Bring James in. Quietly. Tell him it's about the expansion project. Don't give him time to run." "Are you sure about this?" Min Jun's voice was carefully neutral. "No," Sam said. "But do it anyway." While he waited, Sam did something he hadn't done in years. He visited his mother's grave. The cemetery was in Rogers Park, far from the gleaming towers of downtown. Her headstone was simple. Min Hee Park, 1965 to 2017. Beloved Mother. Sam knelt in the dead grass and spoke to her the way he had when he was young, and she was the only person who truly knew him. "I built this empire for you," he said quietly, "so no one could ever treat me the way they treated you, so I'd never have to apologize for asking for what I earned." The wind was cold, carrying the smell of snow. "But I built it so well that someone used it to hurt people just like you. People who work 3 jobs and still can't feed their children. People who apologize for being hungry." He stayed until the sun began to set, until his phone rang with the call he'd been dreading. "We have him," Minjun said. Sam drove back to the city in silence. James Choi was waiting in Sam's office when he arrived, sitting in one of the leather chairs, relaxed, confident. He smiled when Sam entered. "Sam, Minjun said you wanted to talk about the expansion project. I brought the projections." "Stop," Sam said quietly. Something in his voice made James pause. The smile faltered. "Midwest Staffing Solutions?" Sam asked. "Tell me about it." James went very still, professional calm settling over his features like a mask. "It's a staffing consultancy. We use it for—" "You used it to steal from cleaning ladies, from maids, from the people my mother used to work beside." Sam threw the forensic report onto the desk. It landed with a thud that echoed in the silent office. $2 million, James, from people who couldn't afford to lose 10. James looked at the report, then at Sam. The mask slipped. Beneath it was something cold and calculating. "And what are you going to do about it?" James asked. "Turn me in, with your fingerprints all over the operation? We built this together, Sam. You're not clean enough to throw stones." Sam smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "You're right. I'm not clean. But I'm not stupid either." He pressed a button on his desk. The door opened and 3 people entered. Minjun, the forensic accountant, and 2 federal agents. James stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "You think I'm going down alone?" James snarled. "I know where everybody is buried, Sam. Every deal, every dirty dollar. I'll burn it all." "Then burn it," Sam said softly. "But you're not stealing from my mother's people anymore." The arrest of James Choi sent shockwaves through Chicago's underground economy, not because people mourned him, loyalty in that world was transactional, but because Sam Park had voluntarily cooperated with federal investigators. He'd invited them into his empire, shown them the rot, and watched while they cut it out. That wasn't how the game was played. The federal agents came back 3 days later, not to arrest Sam, but to talk. They sat in his office, the same office where James had been taken into custody, and laid out the situation with clinical precision. James is talking, not about everything, he was smarter than that, but about enough. Names, dates, transactions. He's trying to negotiate immunity by burning everyone around him, including Sam. Agent Martinez was the lead investigator. Mid-40s, sharp-eyed, with the weary expression of someone who'd seen too much to be impressed by money or power. "Here's the situation, Mr. Park," she said. "James Choi is giving us everything he has on you, and he has a lot. Enough to bring multiple charges: racketeering, money laundering, fraud." Sam sat motionless, his expression unreadable. "But here's what interests me," Martinez continued. "You turned him in. You cooperated. That tells me something changed. So I'm going to ask you a question, and I want an honest answer. What made you do it?" Sam thought about the answer. About Keisha Brown and her baby. About his mother's hands, cracked and bleeding from chemicals. About the text message that had started everything. "I got a reminder," he said finally, "of why I built this empire in the first place. And I realized I'd built it so well that it was doing exactly what I hated." Martinez studied him for a long moment. "You have 2 options," she said. "Option 1, we take everything James is giving us and add your name to the indictment. You'll spend the next decade fighting charges." She paused. "Option 2, You keep cooperating. You give us everything, not just on James, on the entire operation. Every corrupt official, every dirty deal, every company that's been built on stolen labor. You help us dismantle it. And in exchange? Sam asked. In exchange, we offer you immunity, a clean slate. But you walk away from all of it. The shipping, the unions, the shell companies. You become legitimate. Actually legitimate, not the fake legitimate you've been playing at. Sam looked out his window at the city he'd controlled for 2 decades. Power was intoxicating. Letting it go would be like cutting off a limb. But he thought about Keisha again, about how she'd apologized twice in one text message for needing $30, about how his mother had apologized for being tired, for being poor, for existing. I'll need to make some calls. There are people I need to protect. Like Keisha Brown? Martinez asked. Sam snapped around. Leave her out of this. She's already in it. James knows about her. He's threatened to... Sam stood so fast his chair rolled backward. What did he threaten? He claims she's the one who exposed him. He's suggesting she was working with you from the beginning. If he can paint her as part of your organization... She's a cleaning lady who asked the wrong questions. She has an 8-month-old baby. She's not part of anything. Then help us prove that. Work with us. Give us what we need to bury James completely. Protect her by making sure he can't hurt anyone else. Sam looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once. I want protection for Keisha Brown and her son. 24-hour surveillance until James is locked away. I want the charges against her dismissed before they're even filed, and I want her back pay restored, every dollar that was stolen from her and every other worker at Prestige Property Services. Agreed, Martinez said without hesitation. Then you have a deal. That night, Sam called Keisha. He told her everything. About James, about the federal investigation, about the immunity deal. He told her she was safe now, that James couldn't touch her, that the nightmare was almost over. She was quiet for a long time after he finished. Why did you do all this? She asked finally. I'm nobody, just a wrong number. You reminded me of why empires matter less than people, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is care. The trial lasted 6 weeks. James Choi's defense attorneys were the best money could buy. Slick, aggressive, willing to say anything to create reasonable doubt. They painted Sam as the mastermind, James as the scapegoat. They suggested Keisha was a willing participant in insurance fraud. They tried to bury the truth under mountains of paperwork and legal maneuvering. But the evidence was overwhelming. Sam testified. He sat in that courtroom under oath and detailed exactly how his empire worked. The shell companies, the money laundering, the way power corrupted until even the people you trusted became monsters. He didn't make excuses. He didn't deny his own crimes. He simply told the truth. But the most powerful testimony came from someone unexpected. Keisha Brown took the stand on the 4th week of trial. She wore a simple dress borrowed from Agent Martinez, her hair pulled back, her hands folded in her lap. She looked small in the witness box, vulnerable, nothing like the hardened criminal James's lawyers were trying to paint. The prosecutor, a young woman named Sarah Chen who'd built her career on labor law violations, approached Keisha with careful respect. Ms. Brown, can you tell us about your employment with Prestige Property Services? Keisha's voice was quiet but steady. I cleaned condos. I worked 50, sometimes 60 hours a week. I did good work. I showed up on time. I never stole anything. I just wanted to take care of my son. And what happened when you noticed discrepancies in your pay? I wrote everything down. Dates, amounts, what I was supposed to be paid versus what I actually received. I thought maybe it was a mistake. I thought if I showed them, they'd fix it. Did they fix it? They fired me, Keisha said simply. The courtroom was silent. Ms. Brown, did you know James Choi before this case? No. Did you know Samuel Park? Not until I accidentally texted him asking to borrow $30 for baby food. A ripple went through the courtroom. James's lawyers had tried to suppress that detail, but Chen had fought to include it. It was the kind of specific, human detail that cut through legal jargon and reminded everyone what this case was actually about. And what did Mr. Park do when he received that text? He showed up at my door with groceries, Keisha said, her voice cracking slightly. He didn't have to. He could have ignored me. But he showed up. And then he asked me questions about my job, and I showed him my notebook, and he realized what was happening. Did Mr. Park ever ask you to lie? No. Did he ever threaten you? No. He protected me. James's lead attorney, a man named Harrison, with silver hair and an expensive suit, stood for cross-examination. Ms. Brown, isn't it true that you and Mr. Park have developed a personal relationship since these events began? Keisha's chin lifted slightly. He's been kind to me. He made sure my son had food. That's not a crime. But doesn't that create a bias, a reason for you to testify in his favor? I'm not testifying in anyone's favor. I'm telling you what happened. I'm telling you that I worked hard and someone stole from me, and when I tried to speak up, I was fired. That's the truth. Whether you believe it or not doesn't change what happened. Harrison tried several more angles, but Keisha didn't waver. She wasn't combative. She wasn't defensive. She was simply honest, and honesty had a power that legal maneuvering couldn't overcome. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned, the foreman, a middle-aged black woman who'd worked in payroll for 30 years, read the verdict with steel in her voice. On the charge of wire fraud, guilty. On the charge of money laundering, guilty. On the charge of racketeering, guilty. 18 counts. Guilty on all of them. James Choi's face went white. His lawyers immediately began talking about appeals, but everyone in that courtroom knew the truth. He was finished. Sam watched from the gallery as James was led away in handcuffs. No satisfaction, no triumph, just a heavy sense of something ending. Outside the courthouse, Keisha found him on the steps. She didn't say anything, just stood beside him while reporters shouted questions neither of them answered. "What happens now?" she asked finally. Sam looked at her. This woman who accidentally sent him a text message and changed everything. "Now," he said, "we rebuild." The office building on West Madison wasn't glamorous. 6 stories of brick and glass wedged between a coffee shop and a dental practice. No marble floors, no Italian art, no view of the lake. Just functional space with good light and reasonable rent. The sign on the door read, Park Labor Advocacy and Consulting. Sam arrived at 8 a.m., carrying coffee and a folder of case files. The empire he'd spent 20 years building was gone, dismantled piece by piece as part of his immunity agreement. The ports, the unions, the shell companies, the political connections, all of it scattered or seized or sold to pay restitution. He should have felt empty. Instead, he felt lighter than he had in decades. The consulting firm had been Keisha's idea. "You know how these companies operate," she'd said 6 months ago, sitting in the temporary office they'd rented while building out the space. "You know every trick, every loophole. Use that knowledge to protect people instead of exploiting them." So that's what they'd built. A firm that audited payroll systems, investigated wage theft, represented workers in disputes with employers. They worked with unions now, real ones, not the corrupted versions Sam had once controlled. They partnered with legal aid organizations. They took cases other firms wouldn't touch because the clients couldn't pay. The money wasn't great, but it was honest. Keisha was already at her desk when Sam arrived. She always beat him in now. She'd taken night classes over the past year, working toward a degree in labor relations. During the day, she ran the firm's intake department, talking to workers who'd been cheated, documenting their cases, building the evidence needed to fight back. She was good at it. Better than Sam had expected, though he'd learned not to underestimate her. "Morning," she said without looking up from her computer. "We got 3 new cases overnight. 2 wage theft, 1 misclassification. I'm setting up intake calls for this afternoon. You're here early, Sam observed, setting down his coffee. Malik has a field trip today. Had to get him to Miss Patterson's by 7. Malik was almost 2 now, walking and talking and developing a personality that was equal parts his mother's determination and his own stubborn independence. Sam had watched him grow from that hungry baby into a toddler who laughed easily and trusted completely. Somewhere along the way, Sam became Uncle Sam, not in title, but in practice. He showed up for birthday parties, he babysat when Keisha had evening classes, he taught Malik to count using building blocks and read him stories about trains and dinosaurs. It wasn't the life he had imagined. It was better. Their relationship had evolved slowly, carefully, built on trust earned rather than assumed. They were partners now, in the firm, in purpose, and increasingly in life. Neither of them had rushed it. Both of them had too many scars to move recklessly. But trust, once earned, was a foundation stronger than any Sam had built through fear or money. Around noon, Min-jun stopped by. He worked for the firm now, too, head of investigations, using skills he once applied to very different purposes. He brought lunch from the Korean place down the street and news from one of their ongoing cases. The construction company settled, he said, spreading takeout containers on Keisha's desk. Full back pay for all 23 workers, plus damages. They'll implement the oversight protocol we recommended. They caved fast, Keisha observed. Probably because we had ironclad documentation and they knew we'd take it to court if they didn't settle. Also because Sam's reputation precedes him, people know he doesn't bluff. Sam smiled slightly. His old reputation had become useful in unexpected ways. Employers who might have fought harder against other advocates often folded quickly when they learned Sam Park was involved, not because they feared violence or retaliation, but because they knew he understood exactly how their systems worked and exactly how to dismantle them legally. Fear could be repurposed. Power could be redirected. That evening, Sam and Keisha walked to pick up Malik together. It had become their routine on days when neither of them had evening obligations, this small domestic ritual that would have been unimaginable a year ago. Malik ran to them when he saw them coming, his backpack bouncing, his face bright with excitement about the zoo trip he'd taken that day. "Sammy, Sammy!" He crashed into Sam's legs with the full force of a 2-year-old who hadn't learned the concept of gentle. Sam lifted him up, settling him on his hip with practiced ease. Malik immediately launched into an incomprehensible story about elephants and bananas and a bus that was yellow. Keisha watched them, something soft in her expression that she probably didn't realize showed so clearly. They walked home slowly, Malik between them, holding both their hands. Just 3 people who'd found each other by accident and chosen to stay.
New Year's Eve arrived with snow. Not the dirty slush that usually coated Chicago in late December, but real snow, the kind that fell soft and clean and made the city look almost innocent, the kind that made you believe in new beginnings. Sam stood at the window of Keisha's apartment, her new apartment, the one they'd moved her into 6 months ago. 2 bedrooms, working heat, a kitchen where she could actually cook, still on the south side, still in her neighborhood, but safe and warm and hers. He'd offered to find her something in a better area, but she'd refused. "This is my home," she'd said. "I'm not running from it just because I can afford something else now. I'm improving it." She was right, of course. She usually was. Behind him, Malik was building an elaborate tower out of blocks, narrating an epic story about dragons and knights that only he could follow. Keisha was in the kitchen, making her grandmother's recipe for black-eyed peas and cornbread, traditional New Year's food for luck and prosperity. The apartment smelled like home. Sam's phone sat on the coffee table, silent. No desperate messages, no threats, no midnight calls about shipments or payoffs or problems that needed to be handled before sunrise. Just peace. "You're quiet," Keisha said, coming to stand beside him. She handed him a glass of sparkling cider. Neither of them drank alcohol anymore, a mutual decision made without discussion. "I'm just thinking," Sam said. About a year ago. About a text message I almost deleted. Keisha smiled. Best wrong number I ever sent. They stood together, watching snow fall over the city, Malik's cheerful babbling filling the comfortable silence between them. I got something for you, Sam said. He pulled a small envelope from his pocket. Keisha took it carefully, her expression wary. If this is money, it's not money, Sam said. Just open it. Inside was a business card, simple, professional. Keisha Brown, Director of Worker Advocacy, Park Labor Advocacy and Consulting. You're promoting me? I'm recognizing what you already are, Sam said. You've been running that department for months. You're better at it than I would be. It's time to make it official. Keisha looked at the card for a long moment, then at Sam. Thank you, she said quietly. Not the desperate gratitude of a year ago, but something deeper. Recognition, partnership, equal ground. Outside, fireworks began. Not as many as last year, the city was still recovering from financial scandals and corruption purges, but enough to paint the sky in colors that reflected off the snow. Malik squealed with delight, pressing his face against the window. Boom! Boom! He clapped his hands. Sam lifted him up so he could see better, his small arms wrapped around his neck, trusting and warm. Keisha's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then froze. What is it? Sam asked. A text from someone I don't know. She showed him the screen. I'm so sorry to bother you. I saw your firm online. I work as a nanny and my employer hasn't paid me in 3 weeks. I have rent due tomorrow and I don't know what to do. Can you help? Sam and Keisha looked at each other. Full circle, Sam said softly. Keisha's fingers moved across her phone screen, typing quickly. You're not alone. We can help. Call this number tomorrow morning. Someone will be waiting. She hit send and looked up at Sam, her eyes bright. This is what we do now, she said. We answer. The clock struck midnight. The new year arrived with sound and light, and somewhere in the city, someone who'd sent a desperate text message exhaled with relief, knowing that help was coming. Malik pointed at the window, his voice full of wonder. Pretty, pretty. Sam held him close, one arm around the child who'd become his own, the other reaching for Keisha, who took his hand without hesitation. Noon had come and gone a year ago, bringing groceries and grace, and the beginning of something neither of them had been looking for. Now, midnight arrived, bringing promise and purpose, and the knowledge that sometimes the best things in life come from mistakes. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with sirens or sermons. Sometimes they arrive quietly, at exactly the right moment, because someone chose to care when they could have chosen to ignore. Because a stranger read a desperate text message and showed up anyway.